The young woman moved quickly through the cafe, balancing plates with practiced ease and greeting customers with a smile that masked the exhaustion she felt inside. Every day was long and tiring, but she had learned to navigate it with grace. The cafe was small, with mismatched tables and the constant hum of conversation, the clinking of cutlery, and the faint aroma of coffee and fresh bread in the air. She had worked there for years, and though the job was simple, it gave her a rhythm she had grown accustomed to. She knew the regulars by name and could remember their orders without writing them down. It was a skill, yes, but it was also a distraction from her dreams. Even as she moved from table to table, her mind wandered. She hummed soft tunes under her breath, melodies she had made up herself while washing dishes or refilling water glasses. Sometimes the customers would comment on her singing, asking her where she had learned to carry a tune so well. She would smile politely, brushing off the praise. She had no formal training, no big plans, no idea that these small moments would one day change her life. For now, her music was her escape, a private world she could slip into when the cafe's chaos became too loud. Life had not been easy. She grew up in a small town where opportunities were limited, and dreams often felt like luxuries. Her family worked hard just to get by, and she had learned from a young age that she would need to fend for herself. Money was always tight, and ambitions were often shelved in favor of practicality. Yet, despite the hardships, there was always a spark in her, a small flame that refused to die. She found solace in music, in imagining herself somewhere far away, performing on a stage where people would listen and feel something real. But those thoughts were fleeting, fragile, and mostly kept to herself. Her colleagues at the cafe knew her as reliable and kind. They saw her talent for organization and her ability to calm tense situations with a word or a smile. Yet, they rarely saw the creative side of her, the side that hummed softly while carrying trays of food, the side that scribbled melodies on napkins during quiet moments. They assumed she was like most people they knew, someone content with the simple rhythm of life. But that assumption could not have been further from the truth. On slow afternoons, when the cafe was nearly empty, she would sit near the window, tracing the outline of her fingers on the table and thinking about what it would feel like to step onto a real stage. She imagined the bright lights, the hum of the audience, the rush of adrenaline, and the pure joy of sharing her music with others. It was a dream she rarely spoke of, even to herself, because dreams in her world often felt too fragile, too easily shattered by reality. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the cafe emptied, leaving only a few lingering customers, she found herself humming a tune she had been working on. The melody was soft at first, almost hesitant, but it grew bolder as she lost herself in the sound. The notes seemed to lift her spirits, creating a bubble of warmth in an otherwise ordinary day. It was moments like these that reminded her that there was more to life than the repetitive routines that within her. There was a potential she had yet to fully understand. It was during one such evening that a customer, a middle-aged man who came in regularly, paused to listen. He had always noticed her humming, but had never commented. This time, however, he approached her as she was clearing a table. A gentle curiosity in his eyes. "You have a wonderful voice," he said quietly, almost as if speaking it aloud might break the spell of the music. "Have you ever thought about performing somewhere? Anywhere?" She felt a mix of surprise and embarrassment. "Oh no," she said quickly, smiling politely. I like to sing for myself." But his words lingered long after he had left. For the first time, someone outside of her private world had noticed her talent and, more importantly, believed it was worth noticing. That evening, she couldn't stop thinking about it. The idea that she could share her music with more than just herself and the occasional kind customer filled her with a mixture of excitement and fear. Over the next few days, she found herself humming louder, experimenting with melodies and lyrics during her breaks. She started keeping a small notebook, jotting down ideas that came to her while carrying trays or washing dishes. Her music became more than just a personal escape. It became a companion, a quiet friend that encouraged her to imagine the impossible. Even the tired ache in her legs and the constant demands of the cafe could not dampen. the joy she found in creating something beautiful. One afternoon, a flyer caught her eye as she walked past the local community center on her way to the cafe. It announced an open mic night for aspiring musicians and performers. The words seemed to jump off the paper, almost as if they were speaking directly to her. Her heart raced as she read and reread the details. Could she actually do it? Could she take her music out of her private world and share it with strangers? The thought was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, imagining herself stepping onto the small stage at the community center, the soft spotlight illuminating her as she played and sang. She pictured the audience listening, perhaps nodding along, perhaps smiling, perhaps feeling something real that she had created with her own hands. The fear was there, the nagging thought that she wasn't ready, that she might fail, but it was outweighed by a deeper, stronger feeling, the undeniable pull of possibility. The next day, she went about her work at the cafe with a new sense of purpose. She still carried trays, greeted customers, and wiped tables. But there was a lightness to her movements, a small spring in her step. The music in her head was louder now, not just a whisper, but a call to action. She began to prepare, practicing in secret whenever she could, choosing the song she felt would represent her best self, the song that spoke of hope, determination, and dreams that refused to be buried. Her coworkers noticed a subtle change. She seemed quieter, more focused, yet there was a spark in her eyes that wasn't there before. Some asked if she was nervous about something, and she would laugh it off, saying she had just been thinking too much. But inside, she was bracing herself for a step that could change her life, even if she didn't fully understand what that change would look like. On the day of the open mic, she stood outside the community center, clutching her notebook and taking deep breaths. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of the city and the faint hum of distant traffic. Her hands trembled slightly, but her resolve was steady. She reminded herself that this was a chance, a small but real opportunity to step beyond the world of the cafe and into the world she had always imagined as she entered the building. She was greeted by the chatter of other performers, the soft tuning of instruments, and the nervous energy of people preparing to share their talents. It was a world she had never been in, one that felt both intimidating and thrilling. She found a quiet corner and began to run through her song in her head, imagining the melody, the rhythm, the notes that would carry her voice into the room. When it was finally her turn, she walked to the small stage with a mix of fear and determination. The audience was a blur of faces, some expectant, some indifferent, some curious. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment, and began to sing. At first, her voice was soft, cautious, but as she continued, it grew stronger, more confident. Each note carried a piece of her heart, a piece of her journey, a piece of the countless hours spent dreaming and humming while serving tables. By the time she finished, the room was silent for a brief moment, as if the audience needed a moment to process what they had just heard. Then, applause broke out, warm and genuine. People smiled, some whispered to each other, some nodded in appreciation. She felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of relief, pride, and something deeper. Something she hadn't allowed herself to feel before, recognition, walking off the stage. She felt lighter, almost as if a weight had been lifted. For the first time, she understood that her talent was real, that her dreams were valid, and that the journey ahead, no matter how difficult, was worth pursuing. That night, as she returned to her small apartment, she held on to the feeling, knowing it would carry her through the challenges to come. The world beyond the cafe had opened its door, and for the first time, she dared to step through it with courage and hope. After her first performance at the open mic, a subtle change settled over her life. The applause, the nods of encouragement, and the brief moments of connection she felt with strangers ignited a spark within her that she could no longer ignore. Every morning as she returned to the cafe, she carried that spark with her, tucked neatly inside like a small secret flame that gave warmth to her soul. She was still the same young woman who served tables and smiled at customers, but beneath that familiar exterior something had shifted. She now knew that the music she had carried quietly for years was not just a personal refuge. It was a gift, waiting to be shared more fully with the world. Her days at the cafe remained demanding. Orders needed to be taken, tables wiped, coffee refilled, and customers attended to with patience. Yet she approached these tasks differently now. Each tray she carried, each plate she balanced, each polite exchange with a regular customer was infused with a quiet determination. She hummed little tunes under her breath, sometimes improvising variations of songs she had performed, and occasionally if a customer complimented her voice again. She allowed herself a small, shy smile. Those moments reminded her that she was more than the repetitive routines she performed daily. She was an artist in the making, and even the most ordinary parts of her day became an opportunity to practice, to think, to imagine. She began dedicating her evenings to serious practice. Where before she had hummed melodies quietly while scrubbing dishes or cleaning tables, she now spent hours with her notebook of songs, carefully refining lyrics and experimenting with chords. Her small apartment became a sanctuary. She rearranged the furniture to create a little space for her instrument, and the walls absorbed the sound of her voice, becoming witnesses to her growth. The nights were long and exhaustion often threatened to take over, but she refused to stop. Each note, each careful adjustment, was a step closer to the musician she had always dreamed of becoming. The small community of the cafe began to notice her transformation. Customers, who had once seen her only as a friendly waitress, started asking about her performances. One older woman who visited the cafe every morning brought her a notebook and pencil, encouraging her to write down every song she created. "Talent like yours should not stay hidden," the woman said softly, her eyes kind and sincere. The young woman felt a mixture of embarrassment and pride. It was strange to hear such words from a stranger, yet they echoed what she had begun to realize herself. Maybe her dreams were not as impossible as she had once believed. Then, an unexpected opportunity arrived. A local music teacher who had been attending the open mic events came to the cafe one busy afternoon. He had heard her performance and wanted to offer guidance. "I think you have something special," he said, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. "You need direction and a bit of training, but you already have the core of what makes a great performer." She listened, wide-eyed, hardly daring to believe it. A professional acknowledgement of her talent made her heart swell, but it also brought fear. What if she was not ready? What if she failed? But she knew deep down that this was a door she had to walk through. She began taking lessons with him. In the evenings after her shifts at the cafe, the lessons were rigorous and sometimes frustrating. She discovered that while raw talent could carry her far, technique, discipline, and understanding of music were equally important. There were nights when she felt overwhelmed, or her fingers refused to find the right notes, or her voice cracked unexpectedly. Each time she felt the temptation to give up, to retreat into the familiar comfort of the cafe. But something inside her, a determination stronger than fear, kept her going. Every small success became a victory, and each setback a lesson. As the weeks passed, her confidence grew. She started performing at slightly larger venues, small community events where she could test her skills on a broader audience. Each performance was different. Some nights she felt unstoppable, and others left her doubting herself. But gradually, she noticed a pattern. The more she performed, the more natural it felt. She learned how to connect with an audience, how to gauge their reactions, how to use her voice, not just to sing notes, but to tell stories that moved people. It was thrilling and exhausting, and she loved every moment of it. Outside of music, her life remained grounded in reality. Bills needed to be paid, shifts at the cafe required her presence, and her family still depended on her support. Balancing work, lessons, and performances became a delicate act, but she managed it with a quiet resilience. She learned to schedule her days meticulously, carving out time for practice between shifts and using breaks at work to write down lyrics or polish melodies in her mind. The ordinary routines of life were no longer obstacles. They were a framework that shaped her discipline and gave her creativity space to grow. Her music began to attract attention beyond her small town. Social media posts from people who had attended her performances praised her talent, calling her voice moving and her lyrics profound. Messages of encouragement poured in, some from complete strangers who had never met her, but felt touched by her music. At first she was hesitant to read them, fearing they might be empty compliments or fleeting excitement. But soon, she realized that the support was real. People connected with her music because it was genuine, because it came from her lived experience, her struggles, and her dreams. The realization filled her with a sense of purpose she had never known before. Despite the growing attention, doubt still lingered. There were moments when she questioned whether she deserved this recognition, whether her talent was truly enough to make a difference. There were nights she cried quietly in her small apartment, feeling the weight of expectation pressing down on her. But even in those moments, music remained her refuge. Picking up her instrument, humming a tune, or writing lyrics reminded her of why she started, of the young woman who once dreamed quietly while serving tables, and of the fire that had refused to die. Then came the first turning point of broader significance. She received an invitation to perform at a regional music festival, a larger stage, a bigger audience, and a chance to measure herself against more experienced performers. The offer was both exhilarating and terrifying. The young woman was used to small, familiar crowds, the intimate connection of a local cafe or community event. Now she faced the prospect of stepping into a world far larger and more competitive. But deep down, she knew she could not refuse. This was a step she had been preparing for, even without realizing it. The preparation consumed her. She spent hours refining her set list, practicing timing, breathing, and transitions. She studied the techniques of performers she admired, adapting them to her own style without losing her unique voice. She rehearsed in front of mirrors, in empty rooms, and even in the quiet corners of the cafe during slow moments. Every detail mattered. The way she held her instrument, the posture she maintained, the expression she wore while performing. She wanted her music to speak clearly, to move people, to make them feel what she had felt in the quietest, most private moments of her life. When the day of the festival arrived, she felt a storm of emotions. Excitement mingled with fear, anticipation tangled with anxiety. She arrived early, absorbing the atmosphere of backstage activity, performers tuning their instruments, sound technicians adjusting equipment, the murmur of a growing audience. She took a deep breath and reminded herself of how far she had come. From the small cafe, the late nights of secret practice, and the timid performances at community events. She had built a foundation that would carry her. Through this moment, the festival performance was unlike anything she had experienced before. The lights were bright, the audience vast, and the pressure intense. But as she began to sing, the nerves melted away. Each note she sang, each chord she played, carried the essence of her journey. The struggles, the quiet victories, and the long hours of practice. The audience responded not just with polite applause, but with genuine attention, their faces reflecting emotion, understanding, and admiration. For the first time, she realized that music had the power to connect people in profound ways. Her voice was not just an echo of her dreams. It was a bridge between her world and the hearts of others. After the performance, people approached her with compliments, questions, and encouragement. Some asked where they could hear more. Others offered advice and collaboration. She felt a mix of humility and pride, a realization that talent, when nurtured with dedication and courage, could open doors she had never imagined. That night, as she returned home, she held on to the feeling of possibility. Her journey was still unfolding, and the path ahead was uncertain. But she no longer doubted her ability to step forward, to share her gift, and to let the world see the genius that had always been inside her. In those quiet moments before sleep, she thought about her journey from serving tables to standing on a stage that felt vast and intimidating. She thought about the young woman who had once hummed quietly while washing dishes, the spark that refused to die, and the courage it took to take that first step. She realized that talent alone was not enough. It was resilience, determination, and a willingness to embrace fear that had brought her this far. And as she drifted off to sleep, she knew that this was only the beginning. The world was larger, the opportunities greater, and the stage bigger than she had ever imagined. But she was ready, and for the first time, she truly believed that her genius could be revealed to everyone. After the regional festival, life became both thrilling and challenging for the young woman. The recognition she received was gratifying, but it also brought new pressures. She was no longer just a local performer. Her talent had begun to attract attention from a wider audience, including people who had expectations she had never faced before. While this recognition was exciting, it also made her feel vulnerable. She had never seen herself as someone extraordinary. The sudden validation forced her to confront doubts she had long kept buried. Was she ready to take the next step? Could she live up to the attention and continue to grow without losing herself? She continued to balance her work at the cafe with her growing music commitments. Mornings and afternoons were devoted to serving tables, smiling at customers, and keeping the cafe running smoothly. But after each shift, she would retreat to her small apartment or a quiet rehearsal space, practicing tirelessly. Each evening, she refined her songs, working on technique, vocal strength, and emotional expression. Her dedication was immense, and sometimes she felt the weight of exhaustion pressing down on her. Yet she never allowed it to extinguish her passion. Music had become her purpose, a force that gave her life meaning beyond the ordinary routines she had once accepted. Despite the progress, obstacles began to surface. She faced skepticism from those who questioned her background or doubted her abilities. People in the music industry were polite, but sometimes dismissive, often assuming that someone who had worked in a cafe could not possibly have the skill, dedication, or artistry to succeed. Critics questioned her performances, scrutinized her choices, and sometimes compared her unfavorably to other artists. It was a bitter pill to swallow, and there were days when she felt small and insecure. Wondering if she truly belonged in this world she had fought so hard to enter, adding to the challenge, she encountered competition and rivalry from other performers. Some were supportive, offering guidance and camaraderie, while others seemed determined to prove themselves at her expense. She faced moments of comparison, measuring herself against people who had more experience, resources, or connections. It would have been easy to become disheartened, to retreat back into the comfort of her cafe and private music practice. But each time doubt crept in, she reminded herself why she had started. She had a voice, a story, and a passion that no amount of criticism could take away. During this period, mentorship played a vital role. The music teacher who had first encouraged her continued to guide her, offering advice, technical instruction, and emotional support. He helped her navigate the complexities of public performance, introduced her to important contacts, and reminded her to stay true to herself. She absorbed every piece of guidance, always careful to filter it through her own instincts and creativity. Each lesson, each rehearsal, and each performance strengthened her resilience and deepened her understanding of what it meant to be a performer. She also found inspiration in unexpected places. The stories of other musicians who had faced hardships, risen from humble beginnings, or overcome rejection encouraged her to persevere. She realized that setbacks and challenges were part of the journey, not signs that she was inadequate. Every obstacle became a lesson, a chance to refine her craft and strengthen her determination. With each experience, she grew more confident, learning to trust not only her talent but also her instincts and her ability to handle adversity in between performances and lessons. She continued to work at the cafe, which had become a grounding force in her life. The familiar routines and interactions with customers kept her connected to reality, reminding her that while music was her dream, life itself required balance and attention. She found joy in small moments, a compliment from a regular, a shared laugh with a colleague, a quiet sunset seen from the cafe window. These moments kept her humble, human, and connected to the world around her, even as her dreams expanded. Over time, her reputation as a performer grew. Invitations to perform at larger venues, community events, and local festivals became more frequent. Each performance brought its own set of challenges, bigger audiences, higher stakes, and new expectations. Yet she met each challenge with the same combination of preparation, passion, and resilience that had carried her from the cafe to the open mic stage. She learned to adapt, to read the energy of her audience, and to express herself authentically, even under pressure. Her performances became more than just displays of talent. They became experiences that moved people, told stories, and connected hearts. Despite the progress, moments of self-doubt persisted. After some performances, she would replay every note in her mind, criticizing herself for perceived mistakes or comparing herself to others. There were times when the pressure felt overwhelming, when exhaustion and fear threatened to derail her focus. But she also learned strategies to manage these feelings: breathing exercises before performances, brief moments of meditation, and reminding herself of the joy that music had always brought her. Slowly, she learned to view these doubts not as weaknesses, but as part of the growth process, challenges that could be managed and overcome with patience and determination. Her personal life also evolved during this period. She forged friendships with people who shared her passion, creating a support network of musicians, mentors, and fans who encouraged and challenged her in equal measure. These relationships became essential, offering guidance, feedback, companionship on a journey that was often lonely and demanding. She learned to lean on others when necessary, without losing her independence or sense of self. These connections reminded her that success was not a solitary pursuit, and that collaboration, understanding, and mutual support could strengthen her as a performer and as a person. As she continued to grow, she began experimenting more boldly with her music. She explored new genres, integrated different instruments, and took creative risks that allowed her to express her emotions more fully. These experiments were not always successful, but each attempt expanded her skills, her confidence, and her understanding of her own artistic voice. She discovered that creativity thrived in the space where risk and vulnerability intersected, and that embracing uncertainty often led to moments of brilliance she had never anticipated. One significant moment came when she was invited to perform at a regional showcase featuring talented performers from across the area. The opportunity was both thrilling and intimidating. The audience would be larger, the stakes higher, and the scrutiny more intense. Yet she approached the challenge with a combination of careful preparation and trust in her instincts. She rehearsed tirelessly, refined her set list, and visualized every aspect of the performance. The day of the showcase arrived, and as she stepped onto the stage, she felt a mixture of nerves and exhilaration. Each note she sang, each chord she played, carried the culmination of years of practice, struggle, and resilience. The audience responded enthusiastically, some moved to tears, some clapping and cheering. It was a validation of her journey, an acknowledgement that the risks, doubts, and hard work had been worthwhile. After the performance, she received messages of encouragement, invitations to collaborate, and praise from both audience members and other performers. Yet she remained humble, understanding that every performance was a step in a lifelong journey of growth and learning. She celebrated the victories, absorbed the lessons from setbacks, and continued to nurture her passion with dedication and care. Music had become not just a dream but a way of life, a lens through which she understood herself and the world around her. During these months, she also reflected on the young woman she had been in the cafe, humming quietly while serving tables, dreaming of a stage she feared she would never reach. She realized how much she had grown not just as a performer, but as a person. The courage to take risks, the resilience to face criticism, and the persistence to practice tirelessly had transformed her. She understood that talent alone was not enough. Determination, humility, and the willingness to keep moving forward despite fear were equally essential. Her journey was far from over. There were still stages to conquer, audiences to touch, and creative heights to reach. But she had learned to embrace the challenges, to see setbacks as opportunities, and to celebrate every small victory along the way. The young woman who once felt invisible in the cafe had become a performer with a growing presence, a voice that resonated with emotion and authenticity, and a spirit that refused to be deterred by doubt or difficulty. In quiet moments, she would still return to the cafe, sitting by the window, reflecting on her journey, and thinking about the road ahead. The cafe, once a symbol of limitation and routine, had become a place of grounding, a reminder of how far she had come and why she had begun. It was a place where dreams and reality intersected. The young woman who served tables could still nurture the artist she had become. And as she looked out at the world beyond the window, she felt ready for whatever came next, knowing that with resilience, passion, and courage, she could continue to rise and reveal the genius within her. The young woman had grown more confident in her abilities. But she knew the true test of her talent lay ahead. She had performed at small festivals and community events, gaining recognition and admiration. But now an opportunity arose that felt like a defining moment. A major regional music competition with a large audience, industry professionals, and media coverage. The invitation was thrilling, yet terrifying. She understood that this was more than just a chance to perform. It was an opportunity to prove to herself and the world that her talent could stand on the grandest stage she had yet encountered. Preparation became intense. She spent hours each day perfecting her songs, experimenting with arrangements, and rehearsing until every note and every pause felt intentional. She meticulously planned her stage presence, studying body language, expressions, and the subtle ways performers connect with audiences. Sleep was often interrupted by melodies running through her mind, lyrics she wanted to tweak, and ideas for how to make each song resonate emotionally. The challenge was enormous, yet exhilarating. She could feel the weight of the opportunity pressing on her, but rather than paralyzing her, it fueled her determination as the day of the competition drew near. She felt a mix of excitement and anxiety unlike anything she had experienced before. The competition attracted skilled musicians from across the region, some of whom had years of experience performing professionally. The young woman worried whether she could hold her own, whether her humble beginnings would make her seem out of place, or whether nerves might betray her at the critical moment. Yet she reminded herself of every step she had taken to reach this point, the long nights of practice, the performances at smaller venues, the encouragement from mentors, and the courage it took to leave her comfort zone. All of it had led to this moment, and she was ready to face it. When she arrived at the venue, the atmosphere was electric. Backstage, performers tuned their instruments, ran through their sets, and exchanged nervous smiles and words of encouragement. The young woman took deep breaths, trying to calm the flutter of nerves in her stomach. She felt the familiar sense of humility mingled with excitement. This was a world larger than she had ever known, and she needed to embrace it fully. Every step, every action was deliberate, a balance of focus and letting herself be carried by the music. Finally, it was her turn. She stepped onto the stage, the bright lights making the audience appear as a sea of blurred faces. For a moment, fear threatened to overtake her, but she closed her eyes, drew in a deep breath, and reminded herself of why she was there. She began to sing. At first, her voice was steady, but measured, cautious in its strength. Then, as she felt the music flow through her, her confidence grew, her voice lifting with emotion and clarity. Each note was intentional, each pause meaningful, and the audience began to respond. They leaned in, listened closely, and were drawn into the story she told through her song. The young woman had learned that performance was more than singing notes correctly. It was about conveying feeling, connecting hearts, and creating a moment that people could remember. On this stage, she gave everything she had, fusing her music with the struggles she had faced, the moments of doubt she had overcome, and the quiet triumphs that had fueled her journey. Her hands moved over her instrument with ease. Her expressions mirrored the emotions in the lyrics, and her presence commanded attention without forcing it. The audience was captivated, not just by her voice, but by the authenticity and vulnerability she projected when she finished. The hall was silent for a heartbeat, as if time itself paused to acknowledge what had just occurred. Then the applause erupted, warm, sustained, and genuine. Some audience members rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. Her heart raced, and tears threatened to spill, but she smiled, overwhelmed by the sheer weight of the moment. She had stood on a stage far larger than any she had performed on before. She had held her own, proving not only her talent, but also her courage and resilience. The aftermath was a whirlwind. Industry professionals approached her with invitations to perform at more prominent venues. collaborations, and even potential recording opportunities. Reporters asked for interviews, highlighting her story of perseverance, talent, and humble beginnings. Social media buzzed with praise and admiration. Messages from fans, some who had followed her journey from small performances, poured in. It was overwhelming, yet profoundly rewarding. The recognition affirmed that her music had a genuine impact, that it could move people, inspire them, create connections beyond what she had imagined. Even with all the excitement, she remained grounded. She reflected on her journey, remembering the young woman who had once served tables in a small cafe, humming quietly while imagining a life on stage. That memory reminded her of where she had come from and why she had worked so hard to reach this point. It also reminded her that her talent was inseparable from her dedication, persistence, and willingness to face fear. The applause and recognition were gratifying. But the true reward lay in the knowledge that she had taken the leap, embraced her potential, and allowed her genius to shine in the weeks that followed. Her life became a careful balancing act between new opportunities and the routines she had always known. She accepted invitations to perform at larger events, traveled to nearby cities, and continued refining her craft. The challenges were numerous, adjusting to unfamiliar stages, working with new sound systems, managing performance anxiety, and navigating interactions with industry professionals. Yet each experience strengthened her skills, her confidence, and her understanding of herself as a performer. She embraced the learning process. Knowing that every success and every setback contributed to her growth, she also used this time to connect with her audience in meaningful ways. She shared her story openly, talking about her beginnings in the cafe, the struggles she had faced, and the persistence it had taken to reach this point. People responded with admiration and inspiration, many finding courage in her example. She realized that her journey was not only about personal success, but also about inspiring others to pursue their dreams despite obstacles. Her performances became a testament to the power of perseverance, authenticity, and the willingness to step beyond fear at home. She continued her private practice, ensuring that her growth as a performer remained grounded in dedication and discipline. Each evening was spent refining techniques, experimenting with new sounds, and exploring creative ideas. She also spent time reflecting on her experiences, journaling thoughts, and analyzing performances to identify areas for improvement. The balance between public recognition and private growth allowed her to maintain focus, humility, and a deep connection to her art. The young woman also began collaborating with other artists she admired, learning from their experiences and integrating new perspectives into her own performances. These collaborations brought fresh energy, inspiration, and creative challenges. She embraced experimentation, allowing herself to step beyond familiar comfort zones and explore the possibilities that emerged from combining her talent with others. Each collaboration deepened her understanding of music, performance, and storytelling. Through all these experiences, she remained committed to staying true to herself. Despite the opportunities, the attention, and the praise, she never lost sight of her roots. The cafe, the small stages, and the moments of quiet practice remained anchors, reminders of the journey she had undertaken and the determination that had fueled it. She understood that her authenticity, her voice, and her story were the foundation of her success, and that preserving them was more important than chasing fleeting recognition. One evening, after a particularly moving performance at a large event, she found herself sitting alone backstage, reflecting on how far she had come. The applause, the lights, and the energy of the crowd still lingered in her mind. But it was the personal journey that mattered most. She remembered the long nights of practice, the small victories at community events, the encouragement of mentors, and the quiet moments of doubt she had overcome. Each experience had shaped her, strengthened her, and prepared her for the stage she now owned. In those quiet moments, she realized that the true genius of her journey was not just in her musical talent, but in her courage, resilience, and willingness to embrace the unknown. She had stepped out of a world that once seemed limiting, embraced challenges, and allowed her unique voice to resonate with others. Her performances were no longer just a display of skill. They were expressions of her journey, reflections of her struggles, and celebrations of her growth. She had become not just a performer, but a storyteller, an inspiration, and a testament to the power of determination and authenticity. The young woman knew that this was not the end, but a beginning of a larger chapter. She had proven to herself that she could rise above fear, overcome obstacles, and shine on a stage that once seemed impossible. The future held more performances, more challenges, and more opportunities to grow. But she was ready. She had discovered the strength within herself, the brilliance of her talent, and the impact her music could have on the world. And as she prepared for the next performance, stepping into the bright lights with confidence and purpose, she understood that she had finally claimed the stage as her own, revealing the genius that had always been inside her. The young woman had arrived at a point in her journey where she could finally breathe and look back on how far she had come. The stages she had once only imagined were now familiar, the applause she had dreamed of now tangible, and the recognition of her talent widespread. But with all the achievements, she remained grounded, understanding that the essence of her journey had always been about growth, courage, and staying true to herself.